Okay. Call this meeting to order of the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee on May 14th. First action item is to do a roll call.
Okay, committee member Hart.
You're muted.
You're muted.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, here.
Bowers,
Here.
Penny,
Here.
Goldman,
Here.
Lentz, here, Rust, here, and Chair Harless.
Present. Janet and Carla let us know that they'd be showing up late, so we need to be excusal. We'll do that later in the agenda. Next is the minutes of March 12th. Terry,
Motion to approve.
is there a second?
Second.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? They're approved. Next is review and approval of the Visit Vancouver Economic Impact Partnership. So I'll hand it over to you.
All right, so I have as usual, a PowerPoint for most of today, so I'll kind of work off that. There are technically three different topics probably on your agenda, but they're all kind of part of this presentation. The first is to walk through kind of a proposal around a partnership with Visit Vancouver on a couple things. So I have a slide, I'll walk through that. Then wanted to have a discussion around 2026 grant program priorities. And the notes from our last meeting, we obviously didn't have a meeting last month, so this would have been March, was kind of having that brainstorm. What do we really want to get out of this year? And a lot of that would drive kind of how we would collectively approach outreach, what it looks like from the city. You all have networks as well, Visit Vancouver. And so it would be to kind of hone in on what are the big priorities this year in terms of who we want to see applying or the types of awards we want to give. And then we'll kind of build out more of a marketing promotion from there. And then I just got a couple miscellaneous topics. We'll watch the time to kind of follow up on from previous meetings. So with this, let me tee this up, and then I'll invite Visit Vancouver to share. I also have the PDF I can pull up that you sent over as well. So this is a couple things here. Some of the feedback we got out of last year when we did kind of a debrief from last year's process was kind of still some dissatisfaction, concern about some of the inputs we get in applications, mostly around things like estimating visitors, room nights, right? I think we get them, they're required, but there isn't always the highest confidence level. So what can we do to make those as accurate as possible, or at least increase our confidence that what they're putting in applications is more closely tied to probably reality. There's also, if you remember, elements in our evaluation tool that got into things like return on investment, and we could go as far as what I would call fiscal return on investment. We're not quite there from a city level to be able to kind of pull in all of our spending and budgets and kind of tie that to grant. But I've been working with Visit Vancouver of what I would call a pretty good plan B. And so we wanted to walk through that around estimating economic impacts of proposals as another element for you to evaluate and make recommendations. So that's what this is about. So let me kind of walk through the draft, get your reaction, and then I can pull up, as it relates to the economic impact analysis, some additional information that Visit Vancouver sent over. So in working with Cliff, I'll just kind of start with this is what they're offering is office hours. Probably can't require them, but we can use language around strongly recommend that applicants meet with Visit Vancouver around some of these kind of big attendance, room night, data inputs. They have knowledge of kind of the broader hotel industry and market. They, obviously, you have insight into what events likely attract and whatnot. So they would kind of have these half-hour office hours, could be virtual or in person, to just kind of help them work through the best way to estimate some of that information. Obviously, we're not proposing this as a requirement because that could be some logistical challenges to that. We want to keep this whole process as accessible as possible. But if we get some sort of seal of approval for Visit Vancouver, that could play into, if you remember from your evaluation criteria, there's kind of how confident are we in some of this information that we're seeing in the application? It could influence that as well. And we would obviously know which applicants met with Visit Vancouver and which didn't. That is a process in itself, right? We gotta, there's office hours. We have to coordinate that with our typical kind of schedule of a process here for the grant program. Part of related to that is revising the application period to be open for a longer period of time to give more flexibility. And so what we're proposing is an August 1st to September 19th application period. That would be several weeks longer than normal. The downside of this is, we got a lot of feedback. August can be really tough for certain events and festivals applicants because it can be peak. So we still wanted to keep the majority of September open like we did last year. But this would allow for them as the applications come in, or we would connect potential applicants to Visit Vancouver. It just gives us more time to have these office hours. So that's kind of feeding into the applications and the proposals that we get. What we also have been working with Visit Vancouver on is this idea of an economic impact analysis. So this would be once applications are submitted, doing a more quantitative analysis around what do we think the impacts are. Hence the reason why we kind of have a different application period is we had to build in the potential for Visit Vancouver to run economic impact analyses based on data in the officially submitted applications. So here you can see we're proposing that last week in September, and that may be tight. So this may be something there's probably a little bit flexibility into early October as well. But we would be able to share with Visit Vancouver some of the data inputs. They would run it through a model they have access to that would look at estimating things like what do we think the business sales of this proposal would be, both direct and indirect, taxes generated, grant return on investment, so tax receipts less grant award. These would be estimates. Anytime you do economic impact, these are kind of estimates, but it's another data point for you to kind of measure the impact you see from these types of events. It will likely require us to, we'll have to go back. If we go down this path, go back and just make sure the application asks for the right data for them to kind of run it through their model there. So really what we would have out of this is once we get to October, which is from last year, kind of the period where we started turning these applications over to you to kind of do your pre-evaluation and organizing the meetings, we would hopefully have better data inputs and a new kind of section in here around economic impact analysis for proposals to help you kind of go through your self-assessments and then kind of feed into the broader group conversations as well. The only other thing that we have on here, optional kind of post-event attendance analysis, is Visit Vancouver has access to Datafy cell phone data. It's just another way that we could look at estimating what the actual attendance was at events, particularly for those that don't sell tickets and whatnot. So it is an option for events to work with them after they've happened. This is a data point that they have to submit to us for official state reporting. So it's just another tool for our partners and who we're awarding money to make sure we're getting the best kind of information there. When I pause, I know that's probably a lot. open it up for kind of general comments. And then if you're interested in the kind of economic impact, I have another deliverable that was shared that we can kind of pull up, and it provides a little bit, another level of detail for you all. So I guess we can open it up, or open up for comments, questions, anything?
Any questions? Just raise your placard or put your hand up for comments. Okay, sounds like it.
Everyone's good to go? Figured they wouldn't turn good partnerships down. And just make sure you're comfortable with the application period being longer. But still we're still trying to preserve as much of September as we can, because that's preferred for many than August. But so good with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's great, because even those August events, you know, if they know that it's there, they can at least start digesting.
Yeah.
If you look at the application but not fill it out until later, but at least they're starting to look at it.
Yeah, it allows us to do a little bit longer in the moment promotion as well. Those couple weeks, once it's live, can go pretty quick. So I think it could help with that. I'm gonna share if you real quick, just because I think we have the time, and Cliff is here. Let me share a little bit more on the economic impact analysis.
Can I go ahead and chime in while you're
Yeah.
getting that up? First of all, I've got Kelsey Munoz, our Destination Services Manager, with me today. Kelsey's going to be running point on this partnership for you guys, and so I want to make sure you see her familiar face, that type of thing. When it comes to the application process, it's really going to be a great opportunity for us to sit and have a consultative appointment with some of these applicants that may not interact with overnight rooms and things like that in the way that we do. And I feel like that type of conversation, should the applicants take advantage of it, will be a very, very productive conversation. When we receive the applications or the data inputs, you won't be surprised if Visit Vancouver spends a lot of time already doing data analysis on proposed meetings, events, conferences, sporting events that we're doing our own version of. Should we find ways to sponsor this event to get them to come here and so forth? So this is a type of process that we do quite often. We have modules within our technology and so forth to do that for meetings and sports. We've just added one for you guys so that we can now do a festival and cultural event analysis using the inputs that really are going to be coming from the application itself. Because this is a relatively new tool, just in the last week, we just threw this analysis on the screen right now together just a few minutes ago. We've got some printouts as well too. But by taking information from the application about when the event's going to be, how many people are going to be there, how many people, like the application is going to ask how many people are from 50 miles or more, how many people are paying for overnight lodging, and those type of things we can interpret to fill in the input data that is required for this calculator. So this is a sample only, just in terms of just some words on a piece of paper in terms of what the process would be for us. For input, we have made up this fake test LTAC grant applicant. They're asking for $10,000 for a festival or cultural event. That's actually the name of the tool itself. We can pull down different types of festival and cultural events. In this case, we've decided this sample event would be a performing arts concert, a 3-day concert, June 25th through 28th of next year, with 1,000. These are the input that we'd be getting from the applicant, 1,000 total attendees. From there, we'd interpret that out of town would be 50%. Again, the questions on the application about how many people are coming from 50 miles or more, et cetera, we'd use to do that. How many people would be staying overnight of the subset of people that are coming from out of town? Same thing, another subset for how many people would be traveling via air. And that would give us a calculation then of how many visitors are going to be here. Visitors is not the same thing as overall attendees, things like that. That's what we look at as visitors, because they're the ones that are generating a lot of the impact and so forth. Also, in terms of inputs we'd be receiving from the application, that the ticket price in this example only is $25. They've contracted a room block for some of their performers, but it's only 10 room nights. The tool will take the overall attendance plus the attendance estimates and so forth, and then make assumptions about other people staying in hotels and overnight lodging and things like that. But the contractual room blocks are in there as well, with an average rate there of $205. Chris, you might think that's a little bit too low. I'm sorry about that. But then we take the information from the budget itself that comes from the applicant. We then input information for space rental and permits and F&B costs, security costs, other services. And then the tool already has in it built all the different tax tables, the current taxes that are in the area for sales and for room tax, as well as the TPA and all the different taxes that would this event might be subject to. We put that information in the calculator, it spits out the output. The output is overwhelming. And it includes all this information. This is the output itself for this event. It includes all this information about how many jobs are created and how much taxes and how much federal this and how much different things like that. It's very confusing. It goes all the way into the different sectors of lodging and transportation, real and business services and so forth. It is too much information. We take our version of these calculations and we pull out for meetings and events, we pull out very specific things that are important to us. In a business meeting or a conference, we're looking at contractual room nights, how many people are coming, time of year, all those different things like that. For this particular type of analysis, we've chosen 4 different overall economic outputs. The direct business sales or the direct economic impact, in this example, calculated a little over $100,000 for this sample event. But then the total economic impact or total business sales, including the indirect impacts, would be $142,000. So the calculator would then also tell us that state and local taxes that are generated from that is a little over $10,000. So another input that I think is an interesting one for you to consider is kind of a benchmark or a baseline when you're comparing events within different categories is what we're calling event grant ROI. At the very top of that sample or whatever, we're saying that that particular event is asking for $10,000, right? And so if you give them $10,000, your charge, I believe, as a committee is to try and regenerate the lodging tax account over time. You're trying to make very good investments, right? Not just throwing money away just to have fun and stuff like that. So this tool then would take the very simple calculation of a $10,000 grant, then it bounce that against the taxes that are generated, $10,889 state and local tax revenues generated to show that the grant ROI would be $889 or 8.9% return on investment. And we figure that by taking the different applications within each category and then giving you a spreadsheet to compare, where you talk about the different inputs that are on here, I think that it'll give you some way to really kind of look at these events in totality to try and make better decisions. And so that's kind of what I think we are up to. I do have one clarifying question. Do you think that in the process of us doing this impact study, that we would be able to have the opportunity to call the applicants if we have any questions? My experience in doing this several years ago when Teresa Brump was here, we would receive the packet. And you've seen the packet of information, right? And you instantly have questions. I'm like, oh, I would love to ask this person about why is this budget number like this? Are you really sure that you think that there's going to be this many people here? And I would like the opportunity to try and have that interaction back and forth with the applicants in that time period, because I think it would then be very helpful in terms of us making sure that these numbers are reflective of what we think. Otherwise, what we're going to do is we're going to put out what the application says, or you can charge us with the idea of give us your best estimate based on what you understand, based on the optional interview, and based on what you see in the application. And that's a version of why I want us to ask the question. So I didn't know what your thoughts are on that in terms of that back and forth request.
Jennifer?
Yeah, I would think the applicants would enjoy, or I should say welcome the interaction. Because right now, I think a lot of those questions are coming to us as committee members when they know us personally and trying to figure out how to properly fill out the application. So I think having you guys and your expertise would be beneficial to them.
Good.
Christy?
To make that a fair experience for all, would we have to ask all of the applicants if they wanted to have that conversation? Because there could be some that are underestimating.
Understood. Yeah. And I think you are seeking fairness, right? So I understand the question for sure. Given the idea that you're talking about 4 days in the calendar you've listed, it might be hard to get in touch. We're assuming, by the way, we're using the number 25 for how many applicants we think you'll get.
And I think the way currently this would just, granted, the vast majority are event and festival.
Big category, right?
So,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, so it probably wouldn't be all of them because I'm not sure we're quite ready to look
Yeah.
at this from the kind of capital improvement or.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't be able to help you with that.
For the event festivals, we could. But but you're probably still talking 20. I mean, if it's like last year, 20.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could, what I was thinking is, hey, we pick up the phone and call people, but if we establish written communication with people, we definitely would be able to do that, to be able to see if they have a chance to respond. I don't know. If we're saying that we've inquired but not received the information, I don't know.
Oh, sorry, Terry.
I think, I mean, since we're making it optional anyways, if that's the recommendation that I was hearing, that this wouldn't be a required thing that they reach out to Visit Vancouver, then I think.
Two separate, let me clarify. Optional, there's the, while developing the application. There's the optional opportunity or not required opportunity, but you can work with Visit Vancouver to hone in your attendance and room night figures. So that would be made available between that August 1st and September 29th.
And I would hope
And
that we
we-
accomplish what I'm talking about here for the people that take advantage of it.
Take advantage of it. What this is, okay, they've submitted, it's officially submitted. And before it goes to you all, because we would typically package those like we did last year, it takes us a couple days. And we'd send off with the tool saying, okay, you have X number, 10 days to kind of review and do your individual scoring. We would build in a week, or we'd have to, we'll probably have to kind of get a little bit more precise on this time for them to take, we would send them the application saying, this is all the event and festival applications. Can you use the inputs to run your economic impact model, which we would then hard code into your, have it in your evaluations. So that's the difference.
Got it. Thank you.
Taylor and Kimberly, you guys have been around for a minute and seen this, right? When we've offered the applicants in the past the opportunity to come to City Hall and have a version of this conversation, it's my impression that taking advantage of that. Would you agree with that?
Are you talking about when
Not the
we?
5-minute deal. I'm talking about, haven't we offered them like a chance to, oh, it's a Zoom call where you're saying, hey, do you have any
Oh.
questions, any things like that?
We did that last year.
Yeah,
We had open hours. We had 2 of them that people could come in and ask questions, yes.
yeah.
But I don't know if they've ever, I mean, I've only been here for 2 years, so I've only seen that once.
Was
that after the application?
That was,
But while they were filling it
Wow,
out,
they're filling them out. Yeah, like in the same sense that we're talking about with
Yeah.
us too. I just don't remember people taking too much advantage of it.
Okay.
that was a lot around helping people which category makes most
Yeah.
sense for
Yeah,
them.
yeah,
Yeah.
But they would ask other
Yeah.
questions, some application, like, what do you mean by this question?
yeah.
Kind of stuff. But I think we had 2 of them and maybe there was like 5 in each.
Yeah, I'm just curious about the engagement we can expect, because it'll be an option.
You won't get everybody.
no.
Okay, understood.
I think this was more directed towards the fact that the program had, we had, changed up a little bit too. So we wanted to offer that to help with the categories and picking that.
Which I'm sure we'll still do.
Yeah.
We can still offer, like, are you confused about the process? And we'll probably still do this.
I guess a way I'd like to ask the question is, I feel like from time to time when we're reviewing these applications, there are certain things on certain applications where we're like, wait a minute, what about this, right? And I feel like that is the opportunity we have here to try and help you with getting better applications. If we're not able to discern that because they don't take advantage of the voluntary consultation and they don't, respond to an inquiry about whatever that is, would you like us to identify areas where we say, wait a minute, and then try and let you know that? Or would you like me to try and make our best estimate based on what we have in front of us? Or would you like me to reflect the application itself? That's a nuance there, but I think you understand the nature of the question, right?
I think, well, first I'll say, I think that the option of the optional office hours is fantastic, and hopefully they would take all of them, would take you up on that. I think that as we've seen, we do have questions about how they come up with some of their numbers. And we, in our scoring, had our numbers based on their
Oh, okay.
actual,
Yeah,
and then we had our confidence number, and they were not always the same,
understood.
which I think our judgments were fair, but the process could potentially improve. And I think this offers an opportunity to improve that process.
The confidence part.
Yes, so I'd suggest that we systematize the outreach so that it is as uniform as possible, that maybe everybody gets the phone call.
Yeah.
And if you don't reach them, they all have the opportunity for the call back. And then it's noted if you weren't able to reach them, and that we understand in the analysis that there was this hole. So that you, and then you can give us your best analysis and opinion based on what you saw. But that then everybody is given the opportunity to be treated the same way.
Yeah.
But, and it's transparent that that is how it occurred. So that the question gets asked, everybody has the opportunity to answer it. And then your analysis and your expert opinion is applied across the board.
Kelsey, you're the one who's gonna have to make the phone calls, and I'm thinking about bandwidth. We're offering half-hour consultative appointments. Do you feel like we'd be able to do the phone calls and the calculations? It would seem like.
Yeah.
I would think so too. So
Although those would be different times.
understood, yeah.
Okay, so you would do the 30-minute consultations,
During the
August
application.
through September 19th. And then some period after that, a week, or, again, we can really hone in on the schedule. I think we can push taking the council into, last year, there was a lot of budget conversations. And so we were trying to get out of the way in some cases. I don't know, I'd have to talk to Sarah Dollar, but I think we could probably, I think I took this to council was it December?
Yeah.
Okay, in December, sometime still in December. So I think we can make it work so you have enough time for the impact analysis once the calendar or once the applications are submitted. But it will be tight. I mean, you're not gonna have a ton.
I think the consultation appointments over 6 weeks is not that big of a deal. The
Yeah.
idea of cranking out the calculator stuff really all by itself would not be that big of a deal. Adding the phone call and waiting for people to call back would be one of those things that might stretch us to the thing. But I can see us being able to hunker down for those 4 days and get that done based on what I'm hearing.
We can set the expectation on the application. You're gonna get this phone call and you will have the expectation. You'll have 24, 48 hours to call back.
Yeah.
If you don't, we're gonna proceed.
The 2 years I helped Teresa with that, man, did I want to make those phone calls. So I love the opportunity. Yeah.
About those phone calls.
Yeah.
Do you anticipate they're gonna be the same other types of questions? Or is it all just sort of dependent on the event?
No, it might be that I'm asking, why doesn't your budget add up to the numbers you said? Or you might want to be talking to them about their attendance estimates because they're saying that they're gonna book 3,000 rooms. And I'll say, well, there's only 3,400 rooms in the entire destination. Are you sure that's really accurate? So I think the type of question might really depend on what we see in front of us.
What if you had a dialed in application, there might be no question.
That's a good question. That's a really good question. And I still think, to your point, that we still owe them the obligation of, hey, we'd like to let you know we reviewed the application. Here's what we're seeing. Maybe it's a version of that where we just be saying, hey, we've seen what we've seen.
Yeah.
Just
Good
verifying that, yeah.
Are you looking for work?
Yeah, why can't everybody be like you?
Steve, you had a question, then Christy.
Yeah, thanks. So I guess, I don't know if this is something, and Cliff, I don't want to put you out on a limb here. So, I guess give us your feedback, but in thinking about this, as we're tapping into additional resources like Visit Vancouver to help us as a committee make decisions, not just on actuals, but I think it's helpful to see what the market is doing as a whole. So most hotels in our market have access to a report called from Smith Travel Research called Star Report. I know Visit Vancouver gets one for this county versus other counties. It might be helpful. Again, Cliff, I don't want to paint you in a box here. So if this is not something we can do, let us know. But I kind of wanted to get, as we're talking through this, and I was thinking in my head, it might be helpful for the board. Not everybody is a hotelier and would have access to this information. It might be helpful to be able to see once applicants have submitted their information and we know kind of timeframes, maybe to be able to see, do we have room nights in the market during that time frame that are available? Is that going to help us fill a need time, or are we super jam packed in this? Even if all of their numbers are true, it would be pushed outside of Vancouver to the point to where it wouldn't make sense for the lodging tax dollars.
Yeah, and Steve, help me with what I hear you saying. Be very easy for us to take a STAR report, let's say this sample event for June 25th through 28th, 2026. We could look at the same occupancy for the period the year before and talk to the idea of how many people in market, the average rate for the hotels. So you have some idea of what the overnight marketplace would be similarly for the year of the event itself. Is that kind of what you're looking towards?
Yeah. Yeah, so if we see like every year, June 25th to 28th, using this example, there's 90% occupancy in the county, and we're selling at a $200 average rate. This may not make sense. Even if they do pick up all of this economic impact, they wouldn't actually be staying here physically, or there wouldn't be the room nights to stay here physically in Vancouver. And so, it would push it outside of this. And then I think we would have to weigh that differently than what we would a normal activity, because it's not really going to replace the lodging tax dollars.
It would be easy to add that type of high level hotel performance information for the year prior to the event that they're applying for that same time period. It'd be easy to throw you 3 or 4 pieces of information. How you would use that, I think it'd be a conversation point for you when you're making your decisions. Yeah, I could see
We could provide that. What I'm hearing is in the tool.
Yeah.
Because there's that top section. Here's kind of the impacts, all the data.
Yeah.
And then the bottom half is the scoring, right? It sounds like we could hear some additional information.
Yeah.
To provide context for you.
Yeah, I'd be able
As
to
you score and.
Yeah. Yeah, happy to do that. And I see why that could be beneficial.
Got a couple of things, so we'll take it one at a time. I think we have enough diversity in our board on the hotel side too, or the committee, that we could even drill down into our own comp sets too, because that could get a little bit inflated.
Interesting. Yeah.
If you're looking at it as a county.
Yeah. County and city is what we have.
Yeah. Back to the questioning them, I think that if they have attended all of your office hours and then you have a good level of these that are repeat, you're gonna have valid information. So instead of somebody being penalized for not, if there's some sort of an indication, you could let us know too, that you've evaluated it, even though they haven't had that phone call.
Understood.
And then that could shorten up the amount of calls that you have too.
Yeah.
So if everybody's doing their part on the front end.
Yep.
Then they may not need that phone call.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
good point. We could just a simple indication on the spreadsheet that we would do. Yeah, absolutely.
And then I have a couple more questions, but I want to make sure we complete this topic too. So. Okay. I think we're good. Okay. So for the example here on the input, is the 30% for the out of town, is that a static number, or how do you evaluate that?
No, I'm looking at the categories that Kimberly has to put these lodging tax grants into that turn into the questions on the application that have to do with the amount of attendees, the amount of attendees coming from 50 miles or more, the amount of attendees that are coming from out of state, the amount of people that are staying and paying for overnight accommodations. I feel like there's maybe
Total room nights.
Total room night.
total room nights. Yeah, there's a few of those type of categories. And then we would be taking that information off the application to fill those in. No, those are the type of things that will change for each application based on the input that we receive. And then we'd calculate the number of visitors based on those percentages.
Is there any recommendations, and you may not know this answer, like when it comes to festivals and events, does like the National Association of Festival and Events have any specific averages that their studies show that?
That's a good question. Probably where I'd go and probably check with Bruce, who runs Washington Festivals and Events, and see if he has any high level information like that. I'm happy to do that.
Okay. And then can you share with us what is all included in the direct impact economic number, the 103,000? And then
Yep. Let's see here, and we can pass this around. It adds up, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different sectors, right? So it's giving reports out on the attendees that are going to be in the event, as well as the organizer or the exhibitors of the event itself, to come up with these totals. So the lodging sector has a calculation of about $50,000 worth of impact for lodging for the attendees. That's that assumption based on how many people are coming, based on how many or percentage are out of town, and how many overnight, and how many are coming via airlines or whatever. But then it also has an impact of $122 from the organizer, and exhibitor standpoint. So it has those type of indications for lodging, transportation, food and beverage, retail, recreation, space rental, and then business services is a category that is calculated by the calculator itself. It is not a place where we put the input in. Those other categories are also the type of things, some of those are the type of input we're looking for out of their budget, where it comes down for space rental, F&B and things like that, their expenses for those type of things. We're grabbing those to put those into the calculator, and then it's giving us the input side of it. So it's those, whatever that is, 6 categories.
Okay. And for the lodging, are you just using an average ADR for the county?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. The calculator brings up those same type of tables, but at the same time, when we're talking about the contractual rooms, in this example, the 10 performer rooms, we'd be taking their information for whatever that contracted rate, the actual rate is in that sense. The rest of it's done with analytics.
Is there an option to do a seasonal ADR on the application? Or do you just have to?
Tell me what you mean by that.
Like, so there's obviously a rate differential between a January program
Yeah.
and a July program.
Yeah.
So are you able to, not to create a lot more work, I'm not sure what the functionality of the calculator is.
I see what your
But can
question
you
is. yeah.
put like a winter or off-season or peak season
The-
ADR?
The date of the event would drive that because it's pulling off of our star tables.
Okay, that's even
Yeah,
more
so-
specific then.
So yeah, it would be seasonal.
Okay.
I had one question about the outputs or a comment. So, when you say state and local taxes generated, that's not just LTAC, that's, sales tax, like all of
Mhm.
them.
Yeah, good point.
Because you had mentioned like refilling,
Yeah.
And the event grant ROI, is this like what it would look like this? piece of paper, like-
I typed that like 5 minutes. before
Okay,
that. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I just want to be
I-
careful about using the term ROI because there's so many other returns on investment that aren't financial.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to.
Well, you bring up a good point about the taxes and so forth, because yeah, some of that would be retail tax. And my statement to you about, I want you guys to be able to make sure to regenerating the fund and things like that is because I know that you guys are looking to make the best business decisions you possibly can. But to your point about the ROI kind of being a sensitive thing, we could certainly come up with a different way of describing that. Event grant return.
Return
You
on spend.
do fiscal impact.
incentive.
Yeah, fiscal impact,
So
something like
that
that.
you
yeah.
make sure
Yeah.
it's the fiscal ROI, not another.
Yeah, I mean, it is a good data point to know, but I don't want.
And these are estimates. I just want to be clear, like,
Yeah.
we're not saying this is actually, but we're trying to, it's a way for you to, as you rank and prioritize and make
Yeah.
more decisions.
I feel like it
It's
gives
just
you
another
another
data
benchmark or source to kind of compare across.
Yes.
And I would assume that the output that I'll give you guys would be a spreadsheet where this event, this stuff on one thing would be across one line with the different.
Or I would just, in either way, or that, or I would include the data in everyone's scoring tool.
Yeah.
For each event, so they could see, okay, here are the economic impact results from Visit Vancouver.
Yeah.
And kind of build that up top, so then when you go into scoring,
Yeah.
it's another, so
Yeah.
we'll figure.
I was gonna say, you and I could do that.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Other questions? Christie, did you have one?
Oh, sorry.
Just wanna make sure.
Leave it up.
Chair, I had a question about the review of the applications, the inquiry that we were talking about, those calls. I guess I understand that to be if you're calling, because you have a question about impact of whatever is being proposed on the room nights and this information. I'm thinking about this from the contracting perspective on
I
it.
see what I didn't know where you're going. It
Yeah.
makes sense. This question's a good one.
I guess I'm assuming the application, like what is being proposed to be done, like what the scope of the project is and what would be paid for, that wouldn't necessarily change, that wouldn't change after your conversation such that the application would be supplemented or amended or changed. It's the understanding of what the impact of doing that thing would be at those numbers.
Yeah.
So I guess I want to
Understood.
be thoughtful of, we're not asking them to change their application at that stage or what they're proposing to do or inviting them to change their application. It's clarifying the impacts.
Yeah. Let's use the example of you and I having a conversation about overall attendance, right? And the idea that I'm gonna say your event is in June and June hotel occupancy is 80% already, and you're talking about bringing all these people and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I think that from your standpoint, we are not gonna be able to, from the city standpoint, the city's not gonna be able to reopen the application if you agree that I am right, that you should reduce your application. But what we can tell them, and I'm making this up as we go, that we would use this conversation. We'll make sure that we include that notation in the impact calculations so that they can make better decisions. But I hear your question in terms of process and so forth.
Yeah.
And the right way to do that, because I'm assuming I'm right that you're not going to reopen the application for them to change it.
No, because they would,
Yeah.
and we wouldn't have the time. Because this will be some pretty quick turnaround, and if they've submitted, they've kind of submitted. I mean, one thing you could do is avoid you reaching out and getting clarity.
Oh.
And
use the expert.
we would have to make sure that we ask the questions we ask in the application, the data we ask feed into this, so there may be some slight adjustments. We'd do that all in advance, but you would get in then the applications, you would run them, but you would also maybe have a lens that you could make a note saying, look, we met with them, and so we feel confident about some of these inputs because we already met with them, so we know that. Or we didn't meet with them, feels a little high, just as you're evaluating the economic impacts. No, from our perspective, some of the inputs may have been a little high. So as you look at the return on the fiscal return on investment numbers or the sales impact numbers, just know our confidence on those is this. And so you could provide contextual instead of going through the game of reaching out.
Yeah, I think that's maybe a better process. A good example of the type of
It'd be
thing.
quicker for you.
Yeah.
And we would still get your insight.
Yeah, and Christine, Terry, you'll know this. We've made an adjustment a while back in terms of how we are communicating our sports bookings because of the idea that sports events typically will not contract a bunch of blocks of rooms and be obligated and so forth. And so it leaves sports attendees the ability to go all over the place and do what they need to. In order for us to be able to communicate correctly, we're automatically, when a sports event right holder is coming at us and say we have 1,000 people and it's a new event, never been here, we're reducing that by 25 to 80%, depending on the nature of the event. So that we're trying to give a much more reflective version of what the destination will be able to expect. So we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about our receiving this application, be able to say, well, we see 1,000 people as the projected attendance here, but we're noting that the idea that this is a very busy time in the destination, there's already 3 other things that are going to be happening. And so you guys need to be aware of that. I would certainly that would be our ability to say, you might want to take a look at this one number in terms of your consideration. That's one way to do it.
So where would that conversation happen?
We could do that with the applications. We could do that without having to call people.
It would be additional information.
For who?
As they're reviewing, running the applications through the impact model,
Yeah.
they may, and if they didn't.
Yeah.
The applicant didn't meet with them prior. It would be just like,
Yeah.
the room night numbers feel a little high here.
Yeah.
We ran the impact analysis off of what they put in the application, because that's the data we had,
That we're
but
reflecting the application.
here's some additional information as you consider that economic impact results. Here's kind of.
It's kind of our version of saying, but wait, what about this?
Yeah, from,
We can communicate to you about that.
from a potential applicant perspective,
Yeah,
say they haven't met with you.
Yeah.
And while that is an option and they should take it, if they haven't and they learn after the fact that these judgments have been made about their application, I think that there could be a perception of a lack of transparency and credibility for the committee.
and us.
Which is where I think the phone call, the conversation, I'm not suggesting opening up the application.
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to.
But I think that the opportunity for the applicant to have the conversation is important. And I don't think that, am I,
Yeah, I only was just trying to clarify for
Yeah.
myself that the result of that conversation wasn't gonna be, okay, instead of in June, you're gonna do it
yeah,
Yeah.
in July,
Yeah.
and instead of this thing that you said you'll do this other thing that will, the project is staying the same, or the scope is still staying the same, the thing as it is in the application, but our understanding of the impact and our confidence in whatever the outputs are could be served by that
And
conversation.
just know, granted, that there's a difference, LTAC members appointed at Visit Vancouver, a partner, so there is a different role and relationship. But you're making subjective scoring on all these anyways.
understood,
Yeah.
but also looking for both opportunities to educate applicants so that there's an opportunity for the conversation, so that they don't do this again on their next application. So it can be an iterative process for them to come along on the journey with us and not, and for all of us to grow together. And I think that for everyone's credibility, it is all subjective, but optics matter. And I think that is a place where we could have improved what we did last year in terms of making very subjective judgments about that confidence. I think we were right, but the way that it occurred could have the appearance of looking like we're making judgments about we're not trusting their data and we're not having that conversation with them. And I don't think that that is necessarily a position that we want to be in.
I'm glad you bring this up because we think about our role in this as well too. And it's certainly obvious that we are going to continue to be major applicants for these grants too. So our role in this needs to be pretty clear and transparent. And so that's why I do ask the question about, can we ask questions to give you guys our generalized opinion? Because that is a nuance that makes this really difficult. And I can see, you know, if we do this slightly incorrect, that people can perceive it however they want to perceive it. Yeah.
Steve, did you have something to add?
Yeah, so just along these lines, are we able to maybe include, so if we as a board say, you know, to use the example given, 80%, you know, of the attendees expected for a first time event for this type of event show up versus 50% for this versus 25% for this. Can we include that in the information for applicants? Because I think the flip side of this is some of the applicants may have been lost in how to calculate this for the very first time. I think we saw that in some of the feedback that they provided on their information. Some of it didn't make sense to me anyway from the initial top part of the application to the body were kind of asked similar type questions. Numbers kind of changed a little bit. So if we give them kind of a guideline saying, hey, if this is a first time event, our experience and something that we agree as a board, you know, 80% for first time event of this type, you know, 75 or 60% for this type, 50% for this type, and it's straight out across the board. Everybody has that information in advance. One, it might help them enter in their information. But then two, we're being upfront and treating everybody the same based on the type of event.
If there's information that we feel is credible that would help them produce better applicants, we can always provide a link on the website saying, here's a tool, here's some thing, we know estimating these questions can be difficult. Here's some things to think about. We also encourage you to work with Visit Vancouver, who can really work with you on estimating these things.
Maybe the,
we
that
could,
state,
we could add resources, but, yeah.
maybe the state association, that Washington Festival and Events has a version of that already for like a, first time event producers. Is there some sort of checklist? Is there some sort of? Maybe they have resources we can use.
We have a path forward.
Are we giving our opinion? That's what I'm wondering. Are we able to say, hey, take a look at this? Like, that's the nuance that I'm wondering.
Your opinion to LTAC.
Yeah.
I don't see, unless there's a legal concern, I think credible information for you guys to make board decisions, I don't see that's a negative.
Okay. Yeah.
But I want to make a slightly unique role here.
Yeah.
I mean,
Your questions.
I don't think there's a legal bright line here. I mean, I think there's a way, you're gonna be applying your lens and looking at this and identifying unanswered questions, or if there's this kind of information, that's what you're providing.
Yeah, but we're definitely agreeing. I think that if we say, hey, this number needs to be reduced by 20 or 30, we're just pointing out the idea that, hey, take a look at that number. We're not reducing that number.
Yeah.
Correct?
Right.
Your impact analysis would go with whatever's in their application, but you could say, this number is a little bit high. So if you're looking at these impact numbers, no, we think it'll probably be lower. It's some contextual information for LTAC to look at as you're scoring and then having the conversation around recommendations.
And then past that, we would select who to interview and not interview. And then at the interview, could ask those clarifying questions
Sure.
as well. So, the biggest impact would be whether or not they get interviewed.
Most did last year, all did.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's another decision when we get there, but.
Yeah, they also.
But yeah, it could feed into in-person questions for you all to follow up on, like, I saw in your application that you're estimating this feels high. Tell us more how you got to that number or
Yeah.
something like
I
that.
think so. We know that the marketplace is already busy because of XYZ. Talk to us about how it fits.
Yeah.
And the applicant have that insight in advance of their interview as well, so that they would know coming in, like, that's a question that.
Would they receive the analysis that they do, you mean? Or that they? Would they?
I don't know that we were talking about giving them the analysis.
I don't know
right?
about that.
Okay.
I'm just curious. I'm not against transparency, but that's just, I'm not sure they would.
I guess that would be the question.
Um,
How,
My only concern is this is a very tight window and collecting all your questions, sending those in advance. Quite honestly, there's one more week where we're not scheduling interviews and it's just us coordinating, making sure in your presentation. Well, I'd love to do that. Because of our window for this, weeks matter. So I'm not opposed to it, but we'd have to think about that.
Carla?
And I apologize, this may already have been mentioned, and I apologize for having to be late today, but are we possibly offering the services of meeting with Cliff during the application process instead of just on the end? So maybe folks, he could be, their services could be offered as an expert in this area for the applicant to reach out to them prior to applying on the application.
Yeah, I think the proposal is, we're combining two things. Let me see if I can present this. During the application period, which we're recommending we extend August 1st to September 19th. Whether it's on our website or how we promote, or we would encourage applicants to set up time for office hours with Visit Vancouver for them to work with the applicants around better inputs. And we probably did scope for these types of things. So we would strongly encourage applicants to schedule time to do that. Then they would submit. But once they've submitted, Visit Vancouver would then be taking the submitted applications and going off by themselves and running the impact numbers to include in your scoring tool as another data point for you to look at as you're ranking, prioritizing, determining ward amounts. Is that
And I think we'll also agree that we'll be highlighting a few things that we want you to be looking at and be paying attention to.
So the consultation would occur during the application period, not after.
Thank you.
Good to move to the next.
So obviously, it sounds like good to go, and obviously we'll work out the details and keep you in the loop on this. And we may sit down, like, we may need to ask slightly different questions just to make sure we get the right. Okay. All right. Next option in this.
I'll let you guys continue. You guys good?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Our pleasure. Great to see everybody.
Thank you.
Please attend the Association Washington Business Conference next door.
Yeah,
Up
I'll
for
see
the
you at
day.
3:15.
You guys have a good one.
You too.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, next topic is more of a brainstorm. And again, as I mentioned up front, in our notes from, I think, the March meeting, we talked about having a conversation about what are your grant priorities for 2026? What do you really want to hone in on? Maybe you want to emphasize particular categories or have different outcomes. I think we would just kind of brainstorm those, and then this would feed into kind of work we would do at the city, and we can talk at a later date about maybe work you do within your own networks to promote this program. But we would use your priorities as we're really looking for applicants or festivals like this, whatever your priorities are, would give us some insight in how we would communicate the grant opportunity, do outreach, partners that we bring on board to do outreach, et cetera. So it's just your chance to talk about what your priorities are for 2026. I can pull up the grant categories if that's helpful, or other materials, but I just thought I would take notes.
Christine and then Jennifer.
One thing to look at, is there a cultural area that is underserved in the festivals and events, like a demographic that's underserved? And then winter, I think a winter festival would be good.
Do we know of cultural areas?
Yeah, does like the city know of some cultural areas that are underserved that need focus, and could that parallel to this?
Sure there are. I'm not sure what they are, but I'm sure there are. Yeah.
Jennifer.
Yeah, I was wondering if there is a, social media group, Facebook or Instagram group or something that the nonprofits tie into, and how we could reach them in a more mass kind of way and let them know about our grant program, because so many don't know about it.
I think we used social media last year, right? We did Instagram and Facebook to post, but through the city of Vancouver.
Yeah, I could talk with our comms
But
team.
yeah, I
about
don't know.
this.
I mean, there seems to be a support group, or not a support group, but a Facebook group for almost everything nowadays. So there's got to be one that the nonprofits tend to tie themselves into.
Carrie.
My question, I don't know how much it relates to the grant program, but I'm concerned about institutional knowledge and that all of us are expiring.
Yeah.
Well, the grant program is happening. So that's my priority, is that how are we gonna have this board committee looking going forward? But are we gonna have all newbies, or?
Well, you can do more than one term, so we'd have to go back. We have the data, we have to go back, who's termed out, who has another term and option. And then where there are gaps, we would recruit. It's a little bit out of, this is done through our kind of boards and commissions team. So it's actually not something driven by those of us sitting here. I'm looking at, again, just because I know you guys play a role in selecting members to different public boards and commissions. I'm not sure how much timing, I don't know if we're gonna be able to, in this year, change the timing of recruitment. But yes, we're aware of that. It's a big turnover.
Yeah.
Every 2 years.
Everybody's expiring September 30th.
Everybody
Everybody.
who has another term, that's what we'll have to go look at, like,
Yeah.
because we could do 2 terms.
I think Carla and Steve are.
Steve, I think on there.
Because I think we talked about in a prior meeting about looking to see to extend those at least past the grant, when the grant cycle actually ends.
To December, I
Yeah.
think, December 31st.
Just to extend it those couple of months, so it's on a repeat schedule that actually makes sense for us.
Yeah.
And I know all the boards and commissions right now have gone through a process to have better alignment. So I mean, it is the topic right now, so it would be a good time to bring that up with them. Because we're not the only board that has like these weird term endings that don't make sense or are misaligned. And
Yeah,
then.
how do we stagger? I just looked at my letter, my welcome letter the other day, and I'm 4 years in November, which kind of shocked me a little bit. I can't believe it's been 4 years, but how do we stagger terms to where we always have 50% of the people that aren't expiring as we bring on the new ones? So there is that, knowledge base.
Separately, Community Foundation tends to be a good network for outreach to the nonprofits.
Yeah, I also second what you argued about the cultural areas, specifically just because of the what we're seeing with the new federal administration and, lack of funding towards a lot of demographics. Not just race and ethnicity, but quite a wide breadth. So anything that supports in that area.
Anything else? Hey, I really was hoping we were gonna see more of the smaller cultural enrichment grants than the large event or festival, because then we can tailor. That may influence as we work with partners, like, okay, what are the networks for these communities that may be left out of different things? Are there categories you want to emphasize more? It really could be anything. Like, ideally, would love to see an applicant pool of this. Maybe another way to say it, and then we can tailor the best to our abilities, the outreach to see if we can get that.
Carla?
I definitely agree with off-season events and festivals. I think it would be also great to see some applicants from some of the sporting events and facilities around, maybe even under the capital area, where we can maybe create or help to create some better opportunities to capture some of those types of events in the market, in the community.
We talked a lot about how downtown heavy everything was. So also saying we'd love to see things that are outside of the core, town core.
Anything else?
Types of events, festivals, programs? That we got a lot of and I wouldn't necessarily how we communicate being, we're not looking for these, but we could say, we haven't, Vancouver's interested in having events like this, I don't want to disparage any, but
I don't want to see events that gate off the entire park or gate off entire areas. That's me though. I know that's difficult if it's a ticketed event, but there are other ways to do things too.
mostly Esther Short, you're thinking?
Mostly Esther Shore, I'm thinking, yeah. Just is a huge impact on the community with that park not being accessible on the weekend especially.
Farmers market at the same time. So maybe it's something where, events outside the downtown and taking advantage of other event venues. We could, where maybe gating off isn't as quite at the impact. I don't know what that is.
So, that's, not brew fests and things like that.
And again, I wouldn't say we're not looking for Brewfest. I don't think that'd be appropriate, but
Just
yeah,
a different location.
yeah. Yeah,
Well, like the Oktoberfest that got voted, that they're not actually using the whole park on purpose.
That's great.
Be something that does focus on Main Street. Because of the Main Street being designed for that.
trying to think, that probably won't be the best to push this next year, to put the year after. Main Street will still be under construction in 2026. But yes, the year after, we could say, hey, we have a new asset. We'd be interested in proposals that looking to take advantage of that. Again, we'll be able to shut off streets, do stuff like that. We could do that. Don't know if the construction team would love us pushing events there next year though, but by 2027, yes.
See, the one exception would be, so not necessarily an event, but where it's like something that supports the businesses on Main Street. Like
Yeah,
a tourism that's more like, something that gets people to go to the
Yep.
businesses.
Or a portion that is available, like I know the Pride event. Is having to adjust a little bit this year, but would they have more access to a section of Main Street?
Yeah, I get that, the support of the businesses. Yeah. We ask questions so we could really say, hey, we're looking for applications that really have a focus on how the business community would be impacted by this. Yeah, okay.
During this construction,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
not a festival, but
yeah.
I'm sure there's some creative idea that is tourism related.
Good. Anything else? So I'm here and continuing to emphasize the cultural opportunities that we have off-season outside of downtown. We have questions and criteria around these, so this all makes sense, but I don't think we really last year talked about it as much. They were application questions, but again, as we push this out, or we can put on the website, we're very interested in proposals focused on these types of things. Get that, and then, yeah, kind of if it is downtown, the impact on things like Main Street or other commercial corridors around the city. For sure.
Could there be an option for the city to, at the time the application process is happening in that kind of Q&A timeframe, highlight some of the other areas throughout the community that are useful for events? I think Esther Shore Park is a good go-to. People just know about that, but, or then maybe some of the type of events or capacities that could be in other locations.
That would be good. But definitely. That was good.
Yeah, and I'm sure Visit Vancouver has probably some knowledge too, so.
I think I'm not sure how it would be written, but just, climate, the environment, sustainability. Events that, or applications that emphasize that.
Yeah. Mhm.
Well, if there's anything else, we can email you ahead of.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, again, we'll probably relatively soon think about, I'll meet with the comms team and kind of put together a proposal. We'll do our part from the city, but you all have networks too. So I think as we start getting closer to launching the application period, we could follow back up around maybe ways that you all as community members can help promote, or you have networks that maybe we're not tapping into, stuff like that, so. Other just kind of some miscellaneous topics that kind of fell out of some conversations last couple of months was raised, you know, are we limited to particular events and festivals to awarding to nonprofit organizations, or as it's stated here, awarding lodging tax funds to a for-profit organization if those come through? We had one last year, it was that Sprout Social, was a media company, it wasn't a nonprofit. All of our, but we've kind of had this quote unquote rule that, you know, like, that the event festival who we're granting money to is a nonprofit, they may partner with for-profit, but we've kind of had that rule. So Taylor dug into it. And so maybe I'll turn over what you shared and see if you have any questions or any direction, or we're good with where we currently are.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think it appears to be a self-imposed limitation. The statute that authorizes lodging tax and the spending around lodging tax notably does not require that the recipient be a nonprofit organization. In the tourism marketing and the marketing and operations of special events sections, significantly, it does require that you be a municipality and a nonprofit for different spending categories. So from that silence, I think, you know, we can infer that there's a broader list of eligible entities, the profit and nonprofit or individual. We've reached out, so that's sort of where I stand right now in terms of the statutory interpretation. We've reached out to MRSC, who has received this question before and has answered it in the, for-profit's fine, and kind of follows a similar logic. That's based on some probably now dated conversations between MRSC and the state auditor's office, and the attorney general. So we're doing some due diligence on our end just to make sure that we're all on the same page with other stakeholders who might be interested in the answer to that question, that might look at this. So I can come back at our next meeting and update the board, but that's where I think the answer probably lies right now, is that it's if the LTAC and the city wanted to expand that to for-profit or individuals, there's a statutory limitation that would prevent it.
So we'll come back, think about it. If we're not recommending, it kind of came up as a topic. So here's the latest information. If we wanted to make it broader, it's probably as simple as on for the event festival grant categories, we have we say who's eligible nonprofit. So we just take that off, or we can leave it. Maybe that's where we want to go. I just wanted to kind of share the latest information that we have on that.
Any initial thoughts? Barry?
I mean, if a for-profit company is gonna bring visitor revenue to the city of Vancouver, which is our whole purpose, and it makes sense and pencils out, I have no issue. That's my personal.
I had a similar sort of thought. I mean, that's why this committee exists, is to evaluate things and provide recommendations. And, I think of those larger events like Comic-Cons and stuff like that, they usually are not nonprofits, but bring a lot to the community.
I disagree about their need for the funds. Nothing against them. Certainly want them to come here. For the most part, don't think that the benefit of the support of those funds would go as far for them as it would for the other organizations necessarily. The example that we saw from last year was really a private organization looking to offset their marketing budget by getting free money.
Which we said no to.
We did. And if we just want to review more applications that we want to say no to, we could open it up to private organizations. I would guess that the majority of private organizations that would be looking for the support would be doing the event anyway, and wouldn't necessarily need that support one way or another. Whereas these grant funds, and we are calling it a grant, could make or break, could really make a difference for a lot of the organizations that are nonprofit to bring something unique to the community that might not otherwise come here. And I think that, for me, is an important difference. And I'd prefer to be doing that than simply subsidizing a private business.
I definitely hear what you're saying there. In working with private organizations, so two thoughts. Working with private organizations, sometimes not all destinations are created equal, and we are at a disadvantage sometimes with some of the services that we can provide compared to other competitive locations. So sometimes that can go into play. Otherwise, we may be just too expensive for them. And then on the other side, the amount of applications that we received, I would 100% support that if I felt that the amount of applications that we received fully satisfied the needs that we have for the committee. So I think there's still opportunity to potentially grow overall. I hear what you're saying there, is that it would be great if all of our applicants were nonprofits and they had all the boxes checked so that we could contribute there, because it is harder for them to do that. But not all of the corporations were the best fit for them. And so this could be a good option to help level set that.
An example I would think of is something like Warrior Dash. Warrior Dash is a organized race that is a for-profit company that can bring in, has name recognition, and can bring in thousands of people to a region on a weekend to do a type of an event. And if they were to ask for some grant dollars to help with promotion or other things for that, to me, that would be something that I think we would seriously look at as a committee that would be a win, where last year in that organization, like you said, yeah, they were looking for free money, and that was not a win, and we wisely said, no, thank you. So I think it depends on the situation, and I think if you are looking at a bigger pool, it can be beneficial, but I hear you as well.
I would suggest then that we consider having a framework, maybe some guiding principles, because we could easily find ourselves in a situation where we're saying yes and no, where we will need them, especially if we have a lot of nonprofits in this community that we're saying no to, and then we're suddenly saying yes to corporations, regardless of their mission. Again, optics matter, and especially in a world where government is not necessarily everybody's favorite thing right now, we might want to think about that.
Anyone online have anything to add?
Yeah, I just say that I could think to Temple's point, I think we have a framework in place with our scoring system. And up to this point, even prior to last year, where we had a for-profit company apply directly, we've had other for-profit companies that have teamed up with a nonprofit. And I'm sure they're not doing it on the kindness of their heart to hold events. And so I think this would make it, from the optics perspective, just a little bit more straightforward, saying, hey, does this make sense? Does it not? I would hate for our committee to turn away any sort of opportunity without at least having a chance to look at it and review it and see if it makes sense, rather than just saying no across the board, because they're for-profit or a nonprofit organization.
That's a good point, Steve. I mean, we have how many applications from races that, yes, they partner with a nonprofit for the application, but the race company is definitely a for-profit company.
And
Yeah, we've even had to move stuff off of one application and redefine their budget so that it met what they thought were the qualifications, to Steve's point.
some of the applicants said, well, I'm not really organizing this. I'm just the charity involved.
Yep.
But
Athletes for the Blind said that.
yeah,
And I think some of the needs that we might have for the cultural events could be put on by for-profit organizations. Like, for example, I believe the Lantern Festival that goes around to different cities. I think that's something the community might enjoy, but do we have the infrastructure for a nonprofit to put that on at like Vancouver Lake? So I think that if we could evaluate some of those things, can this provide a hole fill a hole that we can't do on our own?
just like looking at time, so not to rush this. Sounds like Taylor, we may get some additional information that will influence the path on this. It's probably a topic before we open up the application that we'll want to decide on June or July. Or just kind of come to agreement. So I'll kind of keep it here, just think about it. But again, no action is we just kind of continue to move forward how we've done it. If there is a desire to change that, we can.
When would that need to be done by?
Probably the latest July meeting.
Yeah, we could put it on the agenda again,
Yeah.
give time for folks to think about it more.
Okay. Just a couple other quick topics. So we talked about multiple application periods, open application periods. I think there's kind of various interests out there. I did hear, this could be something we do, just want to understand kind of the administrative burden of this and what would that mean and the logistics of it. So so this is staff recommendation. You don't have to listen to staff. My recommendation would be for a couple of reasons. Not this year. I'm not saying never, or I'm not recommending never. Part of it is just honestly just looking at staff. So Kimberly and I in particular, but I didn't necessarily look at Taylor's work situation, although he's always busy. And what it means to kind of go through the process, organize meetings, take things to council. The steps it takes to take 25 applications to council or 2 is kind of the same. It takes all kind of the same amount of work, unfortunately. And knowing kind of who staffs this, we have an ACDEV strategy that we're rolling out to implement a downtown access mobility parking plan. And I guess my recommendation is this may not be the year to push what could be additional staff requirements out of this with some of these other changes that we're kind of proposing around working with Vancouver and all that. Kind of manage staff on this. Not saying it couldn't be as we kind of sort through some of these other bigger initiatives that are impacting our team right now. Next year maybe is a better opportunity to look at that and test it out. But I am worried a bit about staff and administrative burden on this relative to some other things. So full transparency. And then the final one, this is more teeing up as a reminder, is we talked about this idea of we're going to get let's say on average about $1.8 million a year. As we go into, I'm just going to see this in most meetings, as we go into the awarding process and who gets money and how much, there is an opportunity. You don't have to award the full amount every year, that you can strategically decide to hold back amounts and use those in different ways going forward. If you build up a strategic investment pool, you could have a separate application saying, we're looking for proposals that help improve our tourism infrastructure, you know, around this, or signal like that, but you kind of would have to have a set of resources, or you could have a strategic investment fund that could be there to use for bigger community priorities. Like, you know, we know this art center is really popular. We'd love to see it. We know there's a budget gap. LTAC thinks there's a role for us to help close. Just, it's my way of saying, as we go into this process and you start making awards, that part of this calculation can be, let's hold some money back for future strategic investments outside of our standard grant program. So it's been a topic, no decision here, but I think that's something that kind of sits out there for this group to kind of to think about, noodle on how they want to do that. So. All right, that's it.
Chris, can I ask a quick question on that strategic investment fund?
Yeah.
We don't necessarily have to come up with a framework, right? So like if this year we don't have the grants that we want to fund, I mean, we can still hold on to the money and use it potentially the next year for other events, right? That we're interested in, without calling it a strategic investment fund and earmarking it for something specific.
Yeah, totally. Anything that you don't use gets rolled over, and you can use it in 1 year to increase the amount you want to give to grants, or use it in a different way. Yeah. It's an ongoing, I think by me continuing to bring it up, it's an ongoing topic to think about. Of every year we're getting now 1.8. And so how do you best use those dollars? You could roll over for later strategic uses. You could roll over to increase the following year's amount for grants. If we, you know, maybe we see a lot of applications this year, you're like, oh, interesting. You know, so there's some flexibility for you all to kind of think about the use of the dollars now coming to LTAC.
Side, there was review calendar.
Oh, it's just right here. In June, Cliff is going to come back and give a state of the tourism industry kind of update, broader, what's happening in our market with trends, et cetera. In July, we'll kind of here's the kind of latest budget resource update. So we kind of know what we're heading into as the applications open in August. We can then kind of talk a little bit about the grant promotion and outreach, and, you know, based on some of what we talked about today, here's kind of how we're approaching it. Kind of just have a little bit more of a conversation there. August, just TBD, the application will be open. You also know August is a big travel month, so nothing is scheduled. We could cancel it. We could choose to have a meeting if topics emerge. And then really September is probably some sort of conversation, a grant around finalizing the grant evaluation prep, the meetings, the timing, the tools. And then we get into October and November, our meetings are really around evaluating, proposing, and making award recommendations. And then again, December, we can make a call whether no topics there. So probably pretty self-explanatory. Just wanted to let you know, particularly for next month, Cliff is coming to give kind of a broader state of the tourism industry. That may be information for us to think about as we go into the Grand Prix.
This October and November ones, they're usually longer meetings too, aren't they?
And we had multiple.
We had multiple, so we'll have to, yeah.
Yeah, so this doesn't include October. Last year we had 3 meetings, and then we had 4 meetings.
We kept them still to the 1.5.
I think we made them 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
So,
Just want.
yeah, these are just the standard LTAC meeting dates. There will be other meetings in October and November for us to.
They were longer than that. Sorry, they were like 3.5 because
Yeah.
they were or 3 because, and they were on different days.
Yeah.
Because we had all the people come in and do, yeah.
So, yeah.
No, there's a meeting in here like right now, so. I know, we have to do an excuse. Sorry. I'm sorry.
There's no other business. Okay. There's no one from the community today for community communications. We don't need an executive session, so we are adjourned.
Oh, wait.
Oh, sorry, Janet.
Yeah, I can excuse her. She never shows up.
Sure.
So move the excuse Jared from today's meeting.
I'll
There's a-
second that. Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, they're excused. This meeting is adjourned at 1:31.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.